This is an excerpt from one of the chapters called Codependency. I'd recently broken up with someone I'd been dating in New York City. This, my first relationship after my marriage ended, had begun at my downtown San Francisco office at the advertising agency where I worked, when one day I inexplicably found myself having phone sex with Timmy, a business associate I had yet to meet in person. This was not the kind of service that our agency usually provided, and I had no previous experience in this arena. I don't even really know how to explain to you what happened, other than to say that it was as though I had been sexually repressed during my marriage and was suddenly shot out of an Elizabethan canon, reborn as phone sex girl, the sexy superheroine who used her oral skills for oral thrills. Able to leap across personal boundaries and social decorum in a single breath, it seemed that I had truly found my calling when one minute I was on the phone, flirting a little with Timmy, talking about marketing tactics, and the next minute I was kneeling in front of him on the crowded New York subway of his mind with his cock down my throat. It scared me how good I was at being bad on the phone, and briefly considered starting my own 1-900 sex talk business, maybe calling it No Hang-Ups or Bitches Without Borders. Instead, I settled for acting out every fantasy that I had ever had and more on the phone with Timmy. When I finally met him, Timmy turned out to be about 6 inches shorter than me and was a bit of a drunk with massive mother issues. And the reality of our sex life never came close to matching the fantasy of our phone sex. Ironically, phone sex girl became phony sex girl. Still, I had swallowed my own bait, hook, line, phone line, and stinker. And for me, getting the stinker back out was always easier said than done. Still, I continued to date him for about a year, obsessively trying, as always, to reconcile fantasy with reality, until a man who I'd been in LOVE with for years showed back up on the scene, my therapist, Brian. Or rather, my ex-therapist, but apparently enough time had elapsed since I had been his patient, according to some code of ethics, for him to call me up one day and ask me out. The first time I'd swept into Brian's office wearing my 80s purple leather jacket, the perfect accessory for my hubris and desperation, I took one look at all 6'5" of him and thought, finally, the perfect man for me, tall, handsome, and a mental health professional. Unfortunately, he was married at the time, seemingly happily, so I settled for fantasizing during our sessions about ways in which his wife could be eliminated. It's not like I wanted her to suffer. She would pass quickly and painlessly, perhaps in a freakish flash flood or from a cerebral hemorrhage, leaving the way clear for me to move in and apply my very special brand of first aid. While I was daydreaming about his wife's demise, Brian was busy trying to apply a tourniquet to control my emotional hemorrhaging. After 2 months in therapy with him, my internal bleeding finally broke through and I landed in a 28-day alcohol and drug treatment facility. After rehab, I continued therapy, and Brian helped me, maybe even saved my life. He was one of the first people with whom I was able to be honest, except, of course, for the part about me wanting his wife dead. And after a few years of therapy, we became more like friends. You remind me of a girl at a 7th grade dance who really, really wants to get out on the dance floor, but is too afraid to move, he'd said. He was right. I had been that frightened 7th grade girl stuck on the sidelines of my life, and my years of therapy with Brian seemed to boil down to a Nike ad. Just do it, he'd say. The question remained, just do what, or whom? When I'd gotten married 3 years later, both he and his wife attended my my wedding. Shortly after that, his wife ended up leaving him for a woman. The perfect solution, but, why didn't I think of that? But damn. I was a newlywed and still his patient. And then 6 years later, when we were both divorced, he called me. His previous advice to just do it had evolved into just do me when he expressed the desire to be my sex buddy. I wasn't familiar with that term, but I certainly got the gist. I was dubious, conflicted, intrigued, flattered, repulsed, confused, all very familiar dating sensations. But you would think that after years of unearthing and examining my issues, he would have known better. Although, to be fair, there were so many different Wendys, it might have been difficult to keep track of which one he was dealing with. I was like my own disenfranchised franchise. One holiday season, I'd given him a handmade card using construction paper and glitter with the child's awkward handwriting. It looked like something a parent would proudly hang on the refrigerator, featuring a big green Christmas tree decorated with multicolored, multi-personality Wendy ornaments. There was sexy Wendy, dutiful Wendy, overly empathetic Wendy, addict Wendy, sullen and betrayed teenage Wendy, sweet adolescent Wendy, and feisty baby Wendy. And on the top of the tree was a star with a great big question mark. After 7 years of therapy, Brian knew me well, so I thought it was possible that he knew something that I did not. Maybe he had the answer to my question. Thanks.